"Sir, this ticket belongs in economy, but we're full today, so you'll have to sit here." Olivia Hart's voice cut through the soft murmur of business class. On the surface, polite, underneath the scrape of disdain. Screens paused. Glasses hovered mid-air. A few suits traded small, satisfied smiles. Jack Monroe adjusted the strap on his old green backpack. He didn't argue. His palm rested on the shoulder of his daughter Emily, who stood behind him with a white-eared rabbit pressed to her chest. Emily looked up, eyes wide. Jack gave a tiny nod, a signal learned in the quiet space between a father and a child. "It's okay. Keep moving." They stepped into the aisle, walking past pressed shirts, metal watches, the faint perfume of money. His hoodie was faded at the elbows. His jeans were clean, but worn smooth at the seams. Next to the leather headrests and stitched logos, the contrast was stark. A man in a pinstripe suit leaned toward his seatmate just enough for the words to carry. "Wrong turn at the bus station," he said. Dry laughter pricked the silence. Jack didn't bite. His jaw tensed once and eased. Emily's fingers tightened around his. Row 12. He helped her into the window seat 12F and slid into 12E. He tucked the backpack carefully under the seat ahead. The corner of a threadbare eagle patch caught the light, then disappeared into shadow. From behind them came a voice that sounded like sugar poured too fast. "First time up here." A woman in a sleek black dress twirled the lanyard badge from some tech conference. Her smile was bright. Her eyes skimmed Jack and stopped on the frayed cuff of his sleeve. Jack unscrewed a water bottle. "It's just a flight," he said. His voice was quiet and even, the kind that ends a conversation without raising it. Her smile slipped a millimeter. She flipped her hair and faced forward. A couple of passengers chuckled under their breath. Jack turned to Emily. "You good, kiddo?" She nodded, but her voice was small. "They don't like us here, do they?" He brushed a strand of hair off her forehead. "They don't know us," he said. "People fear what they don't know. We don't have to carry that." Her hand slipped into his. She leaned on his arm. Across the aisle, a woman with red nails whispered to a friend just loud enough. "Bet the little one's scared by the exit row." The friend laughed on cue. Jack didn't turn. He tapped the armrest once, twice, a slow, steady rhythm like counting his own pulse. Emily felt it and glanced up but didn't speak. The engine spooled. The cabin hummed. A few rows ahead, a Rolex flashed as a menu opened. Champagne stems clinked. The lead flight attendant came down the aisle, heels crisp against the floor, smile lacquered into place. She stopped at row 12, facing the CFO everyone seemed to recognize. "Mr. Hale, your menu," she said, presenting the leather cover with both hands as though it were ceremonial. Then her eyes drifted to Jack and Emily. The smile stayed. The warmth was gone. "I'm afraid we have limited menus tonight," she said. "We'll need to reserve them for our premium guests." A small ripple of approval moved through the cabin. Jack met her gaze. "Water's fine." The 4 words carried more weight than any protest. Her smile twitched. She moved on heels, clicking harder. Emily whispered mostly to herself. "Why are they so mean, Dad?" He squeezed her hand. "Sometimes people mistake money for worth. That's their mistake, not ours." She nodded a little braver. "We know better." Outside, the runway blurred to motion. The nose lifted. Washington fell away under a slab of gray cloud. Emily pressed her forehead to the window. The clouds looked close enough to touch. Jack settled back, hands loose on his knees. They were wide, strong hands. Not office hands. Hands that had fixed things, carried things, kept more than one promise. 2 rows ahead, a man with a loosened tie twisted around in his seat back. "What's the matter, buddy?" His grin belonged to a late bar, not a cabin. "Hoping they'll let you fly the plane." Laughter flickered again, not as loud this time. Jack turned slowly. Calm level, unbothered. "I've worked near planes before," he said. The grin faltered. The man slid back into his seat. The laughter thinned and disappeared. Emily frowned. "How did you do that?" "With just one sentence. You don't need many words when you know what you mean." Service began. Metal carts whispered down the aisle, real plates for some plastic lids for others. Olivia glided back past 12E with practiced focus as if Jack and Emily were part of the interior like armrests or vents. A phone went up across the aisle, champagne held high for a story. Business class with unexpected neighbors, the influencer murmured toward the lens. Her friend, a lawyer with a perfect bob, didn't bother lowering her voice. Tag it, hashtag upgrade, gone, wrong. Emily shrank a little. Jack rested his hand near hers, not pushing, just present. The rhythm returned in his finger, 1, 2. Steady. Another voice from behind Syrupy again aimed right at Emily. Don't take it personally, sweetie. Business class isn't for everyone. Jack turned his head this time. His eyes were kind and immovable. Kindness doesn't cost extra, he said. Some people still can't afford it. The woman flushed, surprised, and faced forward. Emily's eyes shone. You're different from them. Different isn't bad, he said. Different is honest. The seatbelt sign chimed off. The cabin's noise grew. But under the clink of glass and the whisper of emails, something else moved. A question, the kind that makes people stare without meaning to. Who exactly was the man in 12E? Jack didn't try to fill the space. He let it exist. The clouds slid by like slow surf. His hand drifted to the backpack under the seat to the old eagle patch he couldn't see but knew by touch. He didn't pull it out. Not yet. The pinstriped man spoke again to no one in particular. Airlines must be desperate, he said. Next, they'll raffle off cockpit time. Funny thing about seats, Jack said without looking up. They don't change the person sitting in them. That landed with a quiet thud. This time, no one laughed. Olivia returned with a basket of warm towels and a 1,000-watt smile for the front row. At Jack's armrest, the smile dimmed. Anything else for you? She asked. Water's still fine, he said. Thank you. His tone was clean. No sarcasm, no bite. It threw her more than a complaint would have. She nodded and moved on. Emily shifted, getting comfortable, the rabbit tucked under her chin. Dad? Yeah, if Mom could see us, would she be mad we're sitting here? Jack's eyes softened. She'd say this is exactly where we're supposed to be because we're together. Emily smiled and settled. Outside, sunlight cracked through a seam in the clouds, laying a strip of silver across the wingtip. The man with the tie loosened, glanced back once more, cautiously this time. He said nothing. Jack closed his eyes for a beat. He listened to the engine note, the soft variations in pitch as the plane climbed and leveled. It was a language he didn't speak out loud anymore. But his body remembered it. The steady drum of airflow. The subtle change when the flaps tucked. The way a cabin exhales when the nose steadies. He opened his eyes and looked at his daughter. Her lashes fluttered. Her breath evened out. She was safe. She was here. That was the only scoreboard he cared about. He tapped the armrest once more. Then he stopped and stilled his hand. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone in this cabin. Not yet. The engines had settled into a steady hum, the kind of sound that vibrated faintly through the polished leather armrests. Business-class passengers slipped into their routines, ordering cocktails, tapping at keyboards, scrolling through glowing screens. For a moment it seemed as though the sharp words from earlier might dissolve into the white noise of flight. But contempt has a way of lingering like smoke that refuses to clear. Richard Hale leaned back in his seat 2 rows ahead of Jack. His Rolex glinted as he adjusted his cuff, the motion deliberate, meant to be seen. He turned to his companion, a man with cufflinks shaped like tiny dollar signs, and pitched his voice just loud enough to carry. The airline must be desperate if they're filling business with charity cases, Richard drawled, lips curved in a satisfied smirk. The cufflink man chuckled. Next thing you know, they'll be raffling off seats at the bus depot. Their laughter rolled backward through the cabin, soft but sharp enough to cut. Emily's small shoulders stiffened. She hugged her stuffed rabbit tighter, pressing the worn fabric against her cheek. Her eyes darted to her father, searching his face for a reaction. Jack's gaze stayed fixed on the seat back ahead. He didn't flinch, didn't frown, didn't rise to the bait. His hand rested calmly on the armrest, steady as stone. After a long breath, he turned just enough to meet Emily's worried eyes. "Remember what I told you?" he whispered. "Their words don't define us." Emily nodded, though her lip trembled. Across the aisle, Tara Wells angled her phone to capture the perfect shot of her champagne glass. Cabin lights glittered against her polished nails as she whispered to her friend Claire Donovan. "This is content. Right, imagine day in business class, sitting next to, well, whatever that is." Her eyes flicked dismissively toward Jack. Claire's laugh rang out brittle as glass. "Make sure you tag it, Shachand upgrade gone wrong." The two women laughed together, their tone rehearsed cruel. Emily sank lower in her seat. She was only 8, but she understood mockery well enough. Jack turned his head slowly, his eyes resting on Tara for a beat too long. His stare was calm, but piercing, the kind that made people hesitate. Sometimes he said softly but clear enough for the row to hear the loudest voices come from the emptiest rooms. Claire's smile faltered. Tara shifted her phone, lowering slightly. Neither responded. Emily blinked up at her father, surprise pushing past her worry. She whispered, awed, "You always know what to say." Jack's lips curved faintly. "You don't need many words when you know the truth." From the row ahead, Mark Ellison, tie still loose his grin, still careless, leaned over the back of his seat. "Hey, hero," Mark said, voice thick with mockery. "Wrong section. Shouldn't you be back, guarding the bathroom door?" A ripple of laughter followed, though thinner, now less certain. Jack tilted his head, steady as ever. "Funny thing about seats," he replied, voice even. "They don't change the person sitting in them." The air shifted. The laughter didn't follow. Mark's grin faltered and he slumped back into his chair. Emily squeezed her father's hand, pride glowing in her eyes. The meal service began. Olivia swept down the aisle with trays of menus, her smile reserved for select passengers. She stopped at Richard's row, presenting the menu with a flourish. "For you, Mr. Hale," she said warmly. Richard accepted it with smug ease. Then, Olivia's eyes flicked to Jack and Emily. Her smile thinned. "I'm afraid we have limited menus tonight," she said briskly, voice just a shade too loud. "I'll need to reserve them for our premium guests." A murmur rippled through the cabin, half amusement, half approval. Jack didn't look away. His reply came quiet, firm, like a line etched in stone. "Water's fine." The words landed heavier than protest. For the first time, Olivia's polished mask faltered. She moved on quickly, heels clicking sharper against the floor. Emily tugged her father's sleeve. "Don't you want to eat?" "Dad?" Jack brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "I want you to eat, sweetheart. That's enough for me." Across the aisle, smirks lingered. Their laughter came low, but it no longer rang with certainty. Something in Jack's calm unsettled them. The flight pressed on. Glasses clinked, screens flickered, conversations rose and fell. Yet the air carried a taut undercurrent charged by something unspoken. From behind, Jessica Lang leaned forward again, her voice dripping false kindness. "Don't take it personally, sweetie," she said to Emily. "Business class just isn't for everyone." Emily's eyes widened. Her throat tightened with the urge to reply, but no words came. Jack turned his gaze, locking with Jessica's. His voice was soft but unyielding. "Kindness doesn't cost extra," he said. "But some people still can't afford it." Jessica blinked, her smile cracking for just a breath before she pulled back silent. Emily's eyes glistened. She whispered, "Dad, you're different from them." Jack squeezed her hand gently. "Different isn't bad, Em. Different is what makes us who we are." Outside the window, clouds rolled like silver waves beneath the fading light. Emily pressed her forehead to the glass, watching them drift. Jack leaned back, outwardly calm, though his fingers tapped once against the armrest, a rhythm only he knew. The whispers still threaded the cabin, smirks, sidelong glances, quiet judgments. But beneath it all, a shift had begun. A question forming, even if no one dared ask aloud. Who exactly was the man in the worn hoodie sitting silently with his daughter in row 12? The answer would come later. For now, the whispers circled like shadows pressing against the hum of the engines, trying and failing to chip away at the quiet strength seated firmly in 12E. The cabin lights dimmed to a muted gold, softening the sharp edges of the business-class cabin and creating the illusion of calm. But beneath the steady hum of the engines, the residue of whispered insults lingered like static in the air. Emily leaned against her window, tracing small shapes in the fogged glass with her fingertip, her stuffed rabbit tucked tight beneath her chin. Beside her, Jack sat in silence, his gaze fixed on the rolling expanse of clouds outside. For a while, neither spoke. Silence had always been his armor, but in silence, memory had a way of rising. Emily's small voice broke through. "Dad," Jack turned. Her wide eyes searched his face, carrying the weight of questions no 8-year-old should have to ask. "Why do people act like we don't belong? Did we do something wrong?" The question pressed into Jack's chest like a blade. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "No, Em, we didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes people only see what's on the outside. They forget there's a whole story they'll never understand." Emily bit her lip. "Like when I read just the first page of a book and think it's boring. But then the story gets good." A faint smile flickered across his face. "Exactly like that." Her gaze dropped to the old backpack tucked beneath the seat. The corner of a faded eagle patch peeked out from the canvas, threadbare but stubbornly intact. "That patch," she whispered. "Is it from before? From when Mom was still here?" The words cut deeper than she knew. Jack drew in a long breath, his eyes falling to the patch, and for the first time in years he let the past unspool. A black night sky split by fire. Missiles streaking through darkness. A cockpit bathed in the glow of warning lights. His younger hands gripped the control stick, knuckles white. Sweat stung his eyes. His call sign, Midnight Viper, crackled through the headset amid frantic voices. "We're not going to make it." "Viper, A," pilot screamed. Jack's voice stayed firm. "Stay tight. I've got you." Tracer fire sliced the clouds like lightning. Enemy radar locked onto them, missiles closing fast. Against all odds, Jack guided 3 squadrons out of a trap designed to finish them. When their wheels finally touched safe ground, his body shook not from fear, but from the overwhelming relief of counting every plane home. And waiting for him had been June, his wife, her smile radiant, her arms unyielding. She kissed him once hard before whispering, "You bring yourself back, Jack. That's all I'll ever ask." But fate had its own cruelty. Years later, it wasn't war that took her. It was a roadside accident, a phone call in the middle of the night. Jack, standing frozen in a sterile hospital corridor clutching a toddler Emily, while doctors shook their heads. At the memorial, a folded flag was pressed into his trembling hands, a cruel symbol of all he had lost. That memory never healed. It only scarred. Back in the present, Jack blinked, dragging himself from the ghosts to the quiet hum of the cabin. Emily was watching him, her little brow furrowed. "You miss her, don't you?" Jack's throat tightened. His voice came low, raw. "Every day." Emily slipped her hand into his. "Do you think she sees us now?" He leaned closer, pressing his forehead gently against hers. "She sees you. Always. And she'd be so proud of the girl you're becoming." Her eyes glistened. She buried her face against his sleeve. "I try to be brave like you, but it's hard when people laugh at us." Jack wrapped an arm around her shoulders, steady and warm. "Being brave doesn't mean you don't feel the hurt. It means you don't let the hurt change who you are." Across the aisle, Tara Wells. Her phone, still angled for the perfect champagne shot, paused. She hadn't meant to overhear, but the intimacy of their moment lodged in her throat. She quickly forced her smile back on turning to her screen. A few rows ahead, Richard Hale whispered something to Claire Donovan, and their quiet laugh cut the air. Their contempt hadn't softened. Not yet. But Emily didn't hear this time. She stayed close against her father's side, comforted by his presence. Jack's eyes drifted once more to the eagle patch. His fingers twitched toward it, then stilled. Some truths weren't ready. Not yet. The seatbelt sign chimed overhead. The captain's voice broke through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to weather along our route, we'll be making a brief stop at Andrews Air Force Base to refuel. Please remain seated." Excitement stirred the cabin. Phones lifted. Conversations buzzed. Andrews Richard said loudly, "That's where the F-22s are. Guess we'll get a show." Tara's eyes lit up. "Perfect content. A backdrop of fighter jets. My followers will love it." Olivia heels, clicking in sharp rhythm, swept down the aisle with her polished smile. "For our valued passengers in business class, this will be a rare opportunity to observe one of the nation's premier bases. Please enjoy the view, but remain in your seats unless otherwise directed." Her eyes brushed over Jack, cool and dismissive. The message was clear. "Not you." Jack stayed still. Emily tugged gently at his sleeve. Her voice a hushed excitement. "Are we really stopping at a base with jets? The ones you told me stories about?" His jaw tightened. He gave her a small nod. "Yes, the very same." Her face lit up. "Can we see them up close?" Jack's hand gripped the armrest once the motion subtle. His reply came soft, almost reverent. "Closer than you think." The plane began its descent, engines lowering in pitch. Through the windows stretched a vast tarmac lined with sleek silhouettes glinting beneath the late afternoon sun. F-22 Raptors stood like guardians, their wings sharp and gleaming. Personnel moved across the base with precise, practiced purpose. Passengers craned for a glimpse. Cameras clicked in unison. Emily pressed her face to the glass, her breath fogging the window. "They're beautiful," she whispered. Jack's eyes locked on the Raptors, and without thinking his fingers brushed the eagle patch on his backpack. His chest tapped with a rhythm only he knew, the rhythm that always surfaced when memories pressed too close. For the first time on this flight his expression shifted. Not anger, not shame. Recognition. The captain's voice rolled across the intercom, clipped and steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been asked to make a brief stop at Andrews Air Force Base for refueling and inspection. Please remain seated. It should only take a few minutes." A ripple of excitement swept through business class. Heads leaned toward the windows, phones already in hand. For most passengers, this detour was a novelty, an anecdote to savor over cocktails later, a brush with the sleek world of fighter jets and steel discipline. Richard Hale straightened his tie, flashing a grin at Claire Donovan. "Now, this is worth the ticket price. We'll see the Raptors up close." "Not everyone can say that." Claire smirked, her sharp-rimmed glasses catching the light. "Let's just hope they don't confuse us with less qualified company." Her glance slid toward Jack and Emily like the tip of a blade. Emily pressed her hands to the window. Through a thinning veil of cloud, the base emerged long runways like veins of silver hangars in precise rows, and at the far end a line of F-22 Raptors gleaming under the afternoon sun. Her breath caught. "Dad? Look, just like your stories." Jack's eyes narrowed, his posture rigid. He didn't smile. The sight tugged something deep inside him, a knot of pride, grief, and memory. Down the aisle, Olivia Hart strode with her polished smile heels striking like a metronome. She stopped midway, pitching her voice to Carrie. "This is a rare privilege for passengers in business class. Please remember to remain seated unless instructed otherwise. Security is very strict here. We want to make sure the right people are seen in the right places." Her gaze flicked to Jack, cool and deliberate. Emily noticed. She tugged her father's sleeve. "Why'd she look at us like that?" Jack's voice was steady. "Because sometimes people forget respect isn't earned by a seat number." Emily frowned, then whispered, "Mom wouldn't like her." Jack's mouth curved faintly, almost a smile. "No, she wouldn't." Across the aisle, Tara Wells angled her phone for a selfie with the tarmac behind her. "Content gold," she murmured to the lens. "Business class landing at Andrews Air Force Base. Who else gets this view?" Her voice was pitched high, meant not for those around her, but for thousands watching online. Mark Ellison chuckled from 2 rows up. "Bet they won't let everyone off," he said. "Military brass doesn't exactly roll out the red carpet for tourists." His eyes flicked toward Jack and Emily. The barb landed sharp. Emily gripped her rabbit tighter, but Jack's hand settled calmly on hers, grounding her. The jet kissed the runway with practiced ease. Outside, ground crew in crisp uniforms moved like clockwork arms signaling sharp under the vast blue sky. And then the Raptors. 6 of them, lined in flawless formation sunlight, flashing off their angular wings. Even through the thick glass of a commercial airliner, their presence dominated the horizon. The cabin buzzed. Cameras snapped. Murmurs swelled. "Look at that," Richard whispered, awe briefly softening his arrogance. Those machines could eat the sky alive. Jack's gaze locked on the jets. His fingers tapped the armrest in a quiet rhythm so instinctive he hardly noticed. Emily did. "You're doing it again," she whispered. The tapping. Jack stilled his hand. "Old habit." She tilted her head. "From when you used to—" She hesitated. His jaw tightened. "From before," he said softly. Emily studied him, then nodded, sensing the weight behind his words. The cabin doors stayed shut, but movement stirred at the front. 2 men in uniform boarded. The younger strode briskly toward the cockpit. The older, sharp-jawed presence like a storm contained stepped into business class. A hush rippled through the cabin. "Is that someone whispered?" "A major. Look at the insignias." Emily leaned closer to Jack. "Dad, he looks serious." Jack's eyes followed the man. Recognition flickered, then stilled. The major moved with measured authority, offering crisp nods to certain passengers. Richard Tara Clare, professional, detached, until his gaze shifted and froze. It locked on Jack. For a moment, silence pressed down like gravity. Then the major's voice rang out deep and steady, yet carrying something rarely heard in such tones: reverence. "Midnight Viper," he said. "Stand up." The words cracked through the air like thunder. Gasps erupted, smirks dissolved. Whispers died mid-breath. Emily's heart leapt to her throat. She turned wide eyes toward her father. "Dad." "What did he call you?" Jack's face was unreadable, but his hand found hers warm and steady. Slowly, deliberately, he rose from his seat. The cabin seemed to tilt. Men and women who had dismissed him now stared stunned as the quiet man in 12E stood taller than they had ever imagined. The major stepped forward, boots striking hard against the floor. His hand lifted in a salute sharp as steel. Outside on the tarmac, every pilot by the Raptors snapped to attention. A line of soldiers raised their hands in perfect unison, saluting the man inside the cabin. Emily clutched her rabbit so tight it seems strained. Her pulse hammered. Her father, the man in a faded hoodie, the man they mocked, was someone else entirely. Someone the world had not forgotten. The cabin held its breath. For one long second, no one moved. No one blinked. The name, Midnight Viper, hung in the air like thunder that refused to fade. Jack Monroe, invisible just minutes earlier in his faded hoodie, now carried every gaze in the room. His daughter's fingers clung to his hand, trembling. Emily's eyes searched his face wide with awe and fear. "Dad, what did he just call you?" she whispered, her voice cracking. Jack's jaw tightened. He didn't answer her. Instead, he rose. The movement was slow, deliberate, like a man uncoiling after years of silence. When he stood at his full height, the cabin seemed to shrink, its air growing heavier. Major Kyle Bennett, broad-shouldered jaw carved from granite, remained at the aisle. His salute snapped sharp, unflinching, as though it had been waiting for this moment. His voice carried across the cabin. "Sir, it's an honor." Gasps rippled. A few passengers recoiled as if the air itself had shifted around Jack. Richard Hale, who had mocked him minutes ago, froze with his champagne glass trembling in his hand. Tara Wells lowered her phone, forgetting the camera for the first time. Jack inclined his head, a quiet acknowledgement. He didn't return the salute, he had left that world behind, but the respect in his eyes was clear. Outside, 6 F-22 Raptors gleamed in perfect formation. On the tarmac, pilots in flight suits snapped to attention, boots striking in unison. Their salutes rose like a wall of steel. Passengers pressed against the windows, mouths open. They couldn't compute what they were seeing: an entire squadron honoring the man they had dismissed as less than human moments before. Emily's whisper cut through the silence. "Dad, are they saluting you?" Jack bent toward her, his voice steady. "They're saluting what we've been through," the words quiet as they were burned like fire. Mark Ellison sputtered, his arrogance faltering. This has to be some mistake. He's just—" Major Bennett's eyes cut toward him, cold as steel. "There is no mistake. This man led 3 squadrons through enemy skies when the rest of us believed we wouldn't see another dawn." Whispers rolled like surf. 3 squadrons. That can't be true. Why didn't anyone know? Jack stayed silent. He didn't explain, didn't boast. His stillness spoke louder than disbelief. Olivia Hart tried to reclaim control, her voice polished and false. "Well, this is certainly special. We weren't told we'd have such a distinguished guest aboard." Jack's gaze pinned her, calm but unyielding. "I didn't come here to be announced." The words silenced her. Emily tugged his sleeve. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she whispered. Jack crouched to her level, the cabin holding its breath. His voice was soft, meant only for her. "Because being a hero isn't about what people call you. It's about coming home and being here with you." Her eyes filled and she threw her arms around his neck, rabbit crushed between them. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably, not out of disdain, but shame. Their laughter now felt like a stain. Major Bennett lowered his salute. "Sir, the tarmac awaits. The squadron would like to greet you." Emily's head shot up, her unease gone replaced with awe. "Dad, can we—" "Please." Jack hesitated. The weight of old ghosts pressed against his chest. But her eyes, hopeful, trusting, pushed him forward. He gave a single nod. The cabin buzzed again, disbelief tinged with envy. Richard hissed under his breath. "This is absurd. He doesn't belong out there. Look at him, he's in sneakers." Jack turned his head, voice quiet but sharp. "What I've worn never determined what I could carry." Richard's face drained of color. He looked away. Hand in hand, Jack and Emily stepped into the aisle. Every gaze followed them: polished shoes, diamond watches, whispered apologies. Yet the man in a hoodie and the girl clutching her rabbit commanded the cabin more than anyone else on board. At the door, Bennett gestured. "After you, sir." Jack paused, looking down at Emily. "Stay close." She nodded eagerly. The doors opened. The base air rushed in sharp, with jet fuel humming with power and discipline. As Jack stepped onto the tarmac, the squadron straightened their salutes, snapping higher. The sound, dozens of hands striking in unison, echoed across the vast open sky. Emily's voice was a breathless whisper. "They're really doing it. For you." Jack looked down at her, his eyes softened by warmth he hadn't felt in years. "No, Em. They're doing it for us." The moment stretched, etched into every heart pressed against the cabin windows, into every soldier standing in salute, and into one small girl who for the first time saw her father not as the man the world overlooked, but as the man it could never forget. The air shifted the moment Jack stepped back into the cabin. He wasn't taller, no more sharply dressed, no wealthier than before, yet he was no longer invisible. He carried the salute of an entire squadron, the weight of respect hammered in steel, and everyone in that cabin felt it. Emily clung to his hand, her face glowing with pride. Her stuffed rabbit dangled loosely from her other hand, forgotten because her father now seemed larger than life. The passengers struggled to reconcile what they had just witnessed. Whispers flickered through the rows like sparks leaping from dry wood. "That can't be real," one man muttered. "Why would they salute him?" another said. "Midnight Viper. I've heard that name before." Wasn't it classified? Jack guided Emily into their seats with quiet ease. No hurry, no theatrics, as though he hadn't just overturned the cabin's hierarchy with nothing more than his presence. Across the aisle, Richard Hale leaned toward Tara, Wells' disbelief dripping from his tone. "It's a stunt. Has to be. PR for the Air Force, they love their propaganda." Tara frowned, her phone still in her lap. For once, she wasn't recording. Propaganda doesn't look like that, Richard. Did you see the Major's face? That wasn't acting. Claire Donovan, silk scarf crisp around her neck, sniffed. Or maybe he's a washed-up pilot they trot out for sympathy. Men like that aren't saluted anymore. Emily heard every word. Her cheeks flushed. She turned to her father. Dad? Why are they saying that? Don't they know what you did? Jack exhaled slowly. His fingers tapped a steady rhythm on the armrest, grounding himself. He met her eyes. People fear what they don't understand. Let them talk. Her lip trembled. But you're my hero. His voice softened, steady and sure. That's all I need to be. The attention of the cabin shifted as Olivia Hart reappeared. Her professional smile was pulled tight as piano wire. She straightened her jacket and spoke with brittle brightness. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been fortunate enough to share this flight with a distinguished guest. We thank him for his service. Her eyes flicked to Jack, the words sour in her mouth. Then she turned back to the others, tone sharpening. Of course, let's not get carried away. Many people serve. Not everyone leaves a clean record. The implication struck like a blade. Murmurs rippled. Awe curdled into suspicion. Richard seized the opening. Exactly. I've heard stories. Men like him don't just vanish unless something went wrong. Mark Ellison leaned over his seat, emboldened. Probably got discharged. Washed out. They don't tell you that in the movies. Emily's fists clenched. That's not true. Her voice cracked, cutting through the air. The cabin stilled. All eyes turned to her. Jack placed a calming hand on her shoulder. Em. His tone was firm but gentle. Her chest heaved. But Dad? They're lying. You should tell them. Tell them everything. For the first time, his eyes showed no shield. Only the raw weight of truths locked behind silence. He leaned closer. Voice meant only for her. Sometimes the right choice is saying nothing at all. Silence isn't weakness, Em. It's strength. Her tears shimmered, but she nodded. She didn't fully understand, yet she trusted him. She always did. The whispers reignited. Claire crossed her legs, smirking. See, if he had nothing to hide, he'd defend himself. Jack finally raised his gaze. His voice, low and even, sliced through the noise. Some truths don't belong in this cabin. The words fell heavy. They didn't erase suspicion, but they quieted it. A few rows back, Tara Wells lowered her phone, brow furrowed. For the first time, she wasn't thinking of clicks or views. She was thinking about the dignity in his refusal to explain, and it unsettled her. Emily pressed her forehead into her father's sleeve, whispering, I hate that they don't see you. He wrapped an arm around her, steady and sure. The people who matter always see M. The seatbelt sign chimed. The engines rumbled, preparing for takeoff. Yet, no one thought of altitude or turbulence. The real storm was in the way every passenger now looked at the man in 12E, half in awe, half in doubt. And in that silence, one truth remained unshakable. Jack Monroe was no longer just the quiet father in a faded hoodie. He was a name carried in shadows, a name whispered with reverence and suspicion alike. Midnight Viper. Discharged. That's the word they used. The voice didn't come from the cockpit or the attendants or even the intercom. It came from 2 rows back, low but sharp, the kind of whisper meant to wound. Jack froze. Emily's wide eyes lifted to him. Daddy. What's discharged mean? He forced a smile, flipping open the in-flight magazine as if distracted, but every muscle in his body coiled tight. Around them, passengers leaned in. The awe that had filled the cabin after Andrew's AFB had curdled into suspicion. Not every pilot gets a hero's ending. The man behind him murmured, voice slick with certainty. Word is, he botched a classified mission, put lives at risk. They had no choice but to throw him out. Gasps flickered through the rows like sparks over dry grass. Someone muttered, explains why he's mopping floors now. Jack's jaw clenched, his gaze pinned forward. Emily's fingers dug deeper into his arm, her trust an anchor. Olivia, immaculate in her suit and sharper still in her gaze, seized the opening. So the spotless midnight viper was hiding a stain all along. Her words were precise as blades. "I wonder if silence has always been your weapon, Mr. Monroe?" This silence wasn't a shield. It was a chokehold. Jack's chest tightened under the weight of memory. Against his will, his mind pulled him back to a desert sky set ablaze. Cockpit alarms screaming red. His squadron flying low, ghosting above the sand. Then the order crackled hold position. Protect the convoy. But Jack had seen it a missile lock. Not on him, but on his wingman. Barely 21. A farm kid who had once pressed a photo of his family into Jack's hand and whispered, "Keep me alive, sir." Jack's choice had been split second. He'd broken formation, flared wide, drawn the missile away. It hit. He lived. But the mission fractured. The report called it failure. At the tribunal, the question was simple. Who defied orders? Jack stood tall. Silence saves. My silence will keep them safe. He signed the discharge papers with a steady hand. His men went home with honor. He walked away in shadow. Now in this cabin, the weight of that night pressed down like gravity. Emily tugged his sleeve, her voice trembling. "Daddy, why don't you tell them? Why don't you tell them you're not bad?" Her innocence was sharper than any accusation. Jack pressed his forehead to hers, his whisper cut from gravel. "Because sometimes, Emmy, the truth hurts the people you promise to protect. Sometimes the only way to keep others safe is to carry the blame yourself." Her eyes shimmered. "But they don't know you. They don't know how good you are." His smile trembled but held. "You know me. That's enough." The cabin was merciless. Heroes make headlines, but scandal sells faster. A businessman sneered. "So this is him, the janitor with a tarnished badge. Some role model." Across the aisle a woman spat, "My brother served." He never disgraced his uniform. Olivia leaned forward, her voice velvet but venomous. "Funny thing about silence, Mr. Monroe. It doesn't just protect, it condemns. Every story you refuse to tell, someone else will write for you." Jack's fists tightened on his knees. But before he could respond, Emily slid out of her seat. Her small frame trembled, but her voice carried clear. "My dad is not what you say he is." The cabin froze. Emily's cheeks burned, but she stood tall. "He's the one who makes pancakes with smiley faces when I'm sad. He fixes things people throw away, even when no one thanks him. And he's the one who taught me that being quiet doesn't mean being weak." She swallowed, her voice breaking. "It means being strong enough to put someone else first." Her words cut sharper than any whisper. Passengers shifted uneasily. The businessman looked away. Even Olivia's eyes flickered just for a breath. Jack rose steady as stone and laid a hand on his daughter's shoulder, guiding her back into her seat. His voice was calm, measured, yet it filled the cabin. "Sometimes the loudest truth is silence, but silence doesn't erase sacrifice. It carries it." He scanned the rose faces that had admired, doubted, condemned. He didn't flinch. "I don't need anyone here to believe me. But I'll say this, I'd rather be branded a failure than send a boy home in a flag-draped coffin, if that makes me guilty." His jaw tightened, his eyes unwavering. "Then I'll wear the stain." No applause, not yet. The air was too thick, the wound too fresh. But the sneers eased. The whispers faltered. Even Olivia leaned back, her lips pressed thin. Emily buried her face against his chest, whispering, "I believe you, Daddy." Jack's arms wrapped around her, unshakable. For the first time in years, he let a single tear fall silent, unannounced, like every burden he had carried alone. The cabin remained hushed unease, coiled in the air. Because silence once revealed is never clean. It scars. And scars demand reckoning. The plane trembled in a pocket of turbulence. But inside, everyone knew the real storm had just begun. "Excuse me, sir. Is it true?" The question sliced through the heavy quiet like a blade. It came from a boy no older than 12, sitting 2 rows ahead. His hair was mussed from the headrest glasses sliding down his nose. In his trembling hand, a plastic jet wobbled with every breath. Jack looked up, startled. Since his confession, the cabin had been wrapped in uneasy silence. Now, every ear tilted forward. The hush wasn't suspicion anymore. It was hunger, a need to know where truth lived. Is it true? You flew the Midnight Viper. Emily's grip on her father's sleeve tightened. Passengers held their breath. Olivia's gaze, cool and merciless, bored into him like a prosecutor waiting for a misstep. Jack didn't look at her. He looked at the boy. Yes, he said at last, his voice low but steady. I flew her. The boy's eyes widened. His fingers dug into the toy jet. My uncle told me the Viper was the fastest thing in the sky. He said the man who flew it had to be the bravest pilot alive. Jack's throat tightened. Brave. The word never felt like his. He wasn't a man of medals and parades, just a ghost with janitor's keys clinking in dark hallways. He wanted to tell the boy bravery wasn't speed or firepower, it was a sacrifice. But Olivia's voice cut in sharp as broken glass. And what did bravery cost you, Mr. Monroe? A badge stripped from your chest, a career buried in shame. Emily whipped toward her chin high despite the tears brimming. Stop it. Her voice cracked, but it didn't falter. You don't know him. You don't know what he's done for people. The boy with the toy plane raised his voice, emboldened by Emily's fire. My uncle always said heroes don't tell their own stories. Other people tell them for them. He looked straight at Jack. Can I tell yours? The cabin gasped. It wasn't gossip he wanted, it was permission. To honor, not condemn. Jack blinked, shaken. Then he leaned forward, his voice gentler raw. If you tell it, son, tell it true. Don't make me larger than life. Heroes aren't bigger. They're just the ones willing to break. The boy nodded solemnly as if receiving orders sacred as scripture. Emily tugged her father's hand, her eyes fierce. Daddy, if you keep staying quiet, people will keep hurting you. But if you speak, maybe they'll see you the way I see you. Her words weren't a plea. They were a challenge. Jack studied her face, innocence stitched with iron. And then he saw it, she wasn't asking him to defend himself. She was asking him to teach her how to stand tall in a world that would always try to shrink her. He pressed his forehead to hers, his voice gravel soft. Then maybe it's time I let my silence break. The turbulence struck like a fist. The plane lurched, ripping screams from throats. Overhead bins rattled. A soda can clattered down the aisle. Emily yelped and clung to her father. The captain's voice crackled through the intercom, taut with strain. Ladies and gentlemen, we've hit unexpected turbulence. Please remain seated and fasten your seatbelts immediately. The aircraft dropped hard. Oxygen masks tumbled down like pale ghosts. Then a man in mid-cabin collapsed sideways into the aisle, his face drained white, his breaths ragged. Heart attack, someone shouted. The flight attendants froze, caught between training and fear. Jack was already moving. He dropped to his knees beside the man, instincts firing like combat alarms. His palms pressed down in steady rhythm. Call it out, he barked. We've got cardiac arrest. Bring me the AED now. A flight attendant scrambled, fumbling through the overhead. Jack's voice cut through the panic, sharp and commanding. Count with me. He drove compressions into the man's chest. 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't let me lose him. Emily sat, frozen hands over her mouth, watching her father transform. This wasn't the quiet janitor who fixed leaky faucets. This was someone fierce, unflinching, a leader burning through the shadows. Olivia, too, was struck silent. The man she'd tried to paint as a ghost was suddenly undeniable. The AED arrived. Jack tore open the package with soldier's precision, placed the pads, and shouted, Clear. The jolt snapped through the man's body. For a breathless second, nothing. Then a gasp. Shallow, but alive. Relief surged through the cabin like breaking waves. Applause cracked, messy, but real. A woman sobbed into her hands. Jack sat back, sweat dampening his shirt chest, heaving. He looked up to find Emily staring at him as if she'd just seen the truth of him for the first time. "Daddy," she whispered, voice trembling with awe. "You didn't stay silent this time." His smile came weary but certain. "No, sweetheart. Some moments don't let you." When paramedics boarded at the emergency landing, Jack stayed quiet as the man was wheeled away. But the silence now wasn't damning. It was reverent. No one saw a disgraced janitor anymore. They saw the man who had chosen silence when it shielded others and action when it saved a life. Even Olivia's lips pressed thin looked shaken. She'd come searching for cracks. Instead, she'd found fire. As the engines roared again and the plane lifted skyward, Emily curled against her father. Her words pierced deeper than any tribunal ever had. "You told me silence can save, but today I learned something too." She tilted her face up, eyes blazing with a child's fierce truth. Courage saves louder. Jack kissed the crown of her head, his hand steady on her shoulder. For the first time in years, he let himself believe she was right. The stain of silence hadn't vanished. But maybe, just maybe, courage was beginning to write a new story. The sky outside had turned from blue to a violent smear of gray, the storm clawing at the aircraft with invisible fists. Rain streaked the windows in diagonal lashes. Inside, every passenger sat strapped tight, knuckles pale against armrests. The memory of the man who had collapsed lingered, but it was quickly swallowed by something larger, nature itself. The seatbelt sign glowed red. The plane pitched hard, drawing gasps and muffled cries. A coffee cup skittered off a tray and struck the floor. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, tense but composed. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've encountered an unexpected storm system. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We'll do everything possible to maintain a safe course." But the words didn't settle nerves. Fear spread like smoke. Emily's small hand clutched Jack's instantly. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, held both trust and terror. "Daddy, are we going to fall?" Jack squeezed her hand, leaning close so only she could hear. "No, sweetheart. Planes are built to ride storms, just like us." "But you're shaking," she whispered, noticing the tremor in his hand. He swallowed hard, forcing stillness into his grip. "That's not fear. That's memory." The storm struck again harder, shoving luggage against the overhead bins. A woman screamed in the back, sparking a ripple of panic. Flight attendants rushed down the aisle, their voices urging calm but cracking under strain. Then Olivia stood. Bracing against the lurch, her sharp voice cut the noise clean. "Everyone, sit down. Panic will not save you." It wasn't soothing, but it silenced the cabin. Dozens of eyes turned toward her. Then hers locked on Jack, sharp, fierce, but not mocking this time. "If you know something that can keep these people calm, Monroe, now is the time." Jack hesitated. The storm rattled the fuselage like a giant's fist. Every face was turned toward him now. They didn't want the janitor, they wanted the pilot. Emily tugged his sleeve, her voice trembling but resolute. "Daddy, you told me silence can save. But this storm doesn't need silence. It needs you." Her words struck harder than the turbulence. He looked at her and saw not just his daughter, but his reason. Slowly he rose, gripping the back of the seat for balance. When he spoke, his voice carried steady through the roar. "Listen to me. I've flown storms like this before. You'll feel jolts, you'll hear noises. But none of that means the plane is failing. It means she's fighting, and trust me, she's strong enough to win." The cabin hushed, breaths still ragged but tethered now. The boy with the toy jet raised it in trembling hands. Like the midnight viper, Jack allowed the faintest smile. Exactly. The viper never quit. Neither will this plane. Another violent shake rolled through the cabin, drawing gasps, but this time no screams. People gripped their seats tighter, eyes squeezed shut, but now with something new in their fear discipline. Belief. Olivia sank slowly back into her seat. Her eyes never left Jack. No sneer curled her lips now, only something unreadable, almost human. Minutes dragged like hours. Lightning flashed across the windows, painting faces in ghostly white. Emily pressed against her father's chest, whispering, "You're not invisible anymore, Daddy. Everyone sees you now." He kissed her hair, jaw tight. "That's not what matters, Em. What matters is you see me." Tears brimmed in her eyes. "I always did." The words cracked something inside him in the best way. For years, silence had been his shield, but it had also buried him, and Emily deserved a father who was more than a ghost. Suddenly, the plane dropped. Weightlessness stole the air from every chest. Passengers screamed, lights flickered. For a breathless second, Jack was back in the cockpit, alarms blaring, co-pilot shouting, sky tearing apart. He forced the past away, whispering under his breath, "This isn't combat. This is survival." Emily clung tighter. "Daddy?" His arms locked around her. "I've got you. Always." At last, after what felt like an eternity, the turbulence eased. The engines steadied, smoothing back into rhythm. The captain's voice returned lighter now, ragged with relief. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've cleared the worst of it. Thank you for staying calm. We'll continue on course to Washington." Applause broke out, shaky, uneven, but real. Some passengers cried openly. Others reached across aisles to clasp hands. Relief swept through like a tide. Jack stayed still. Emily pressed to his chest, his breath leaving him in shudders. The boy with the toy plane leaned over the seat, eyes wide. "You were right, sir. The plane fought, and so did you." Jack's lips curved into a tired smile. Sometimes fighting just means holding on. Then Olivia's voice drifted across the aisle, softer than anyone had ever heard it. "And sometimes it means letting people see you for who you are." Jack met her gaze. For once there was no battle in her eyes, only recognition. As the cabin lights dimmed, passengers settling into uneasy calm, Emily whispered, "Daddy, when we land, will you tell them the truth about what really happened?" Jack stroked her hair, his gaze fixed on the dark horizon outside. His voice was steady, unshakable. "Yes, when the sky calls you, answer. And the truth has been calling me for a long time." The storm had passed, but the silence that followed felt heavier than thunder. Passengers whispered nervously, replaying the terror, their eyes flicking toward Jack as if he carried answers the captain hadn't given. Even the hum of the engine seemed subdued, echoing with things unsaid. Jack sat rigid. Emily curled beneath his arm. His pulse hadn't slowed since the turbulence eased. He had spoken up, steadied them, stepped out of the shadows where he had hidden for years, and now there was no undoing it. Across the aisle, Olivia studied him with an intensity that felt like interrogation. "You're not just some janitor," she said finally, her voice low, but cutting through the hush. "The way you spoke, the calm in your voice. You've flown before, haven't you?" Nearby passengers leaned in. The boy with the toy plane clutched it to his chest, wide-eyed, waiting. Jack drew a slow breath. He could lie. He had been lying for years, but the storm had stripped something away. Emily's hand squeezed his, urging him forward. "Once," Jack said, his voice carrying down the aisle, "I was a pilot, not commercial, military, F-22s. My call sign was Midnight Viper. The cabin inhaled as one. Whispers rippled instantly. The boy's mouth fell open, repeating the name like it was legend, Midnight Viper." Olivia's eyes narrowed. Then why the mop? Why the shadows? What happened to bury a man like that in silence? The question pierced deeper than turbulence ever could. Jack's chest tightened. He saw faces, his squad, his brothers in arms flashing before him. The night that ended it all. The silence he had carried like a coffin. "I was discharged under a cloud," he said. "There was a mission, a choice I made that saved lives but broke rules. Someone had to take the fall and I stayed quiet. It cost me my wings, my career, my name." His voice trembled, but he didn't stop. "For years, silence was my shield. It kept my daughter safe. It kept me breathing." But tonight, his eyes swept the cabin meeting, every gaze some tearful, some reverent. "Tonight reminded me that silence isn't always strength. Sometimes it's a cage." Emily tilted her face up to him, her voice small but piercing. "Daddy, cages are for birds who forget they can fly." Gasps turned to soft laughter, not mocking but marveling. Jack kissed the crown of her head, his throat tightening. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice said taut with strain. "Weather over Washington is worsening. We've been cleared for a direct approach, but it'll be tight. Air Force Command has dispatched escorts to guide us through." As if on cue, twin shadows streaked past the windows, sleek fighter jets, wings gleaming in the dying stormlight. A ripple of awe swept the cabin. Emily's eyes went wide. "Daddy." "Look." Eagles. Jack's chest clenched. Familiar silhouettes, the kind he once flew beside. And then, cutting through the static of the intercom, came a voice clear, commanding, chillingly familiar. "Eagle 1 to midnight." "Viper. Do you copy?" The entire cabin froze. Passengers glanced at one another in disbelief. Olivia's jaw fell open. Jack's breath caught. He hadn't heard that name aloud since the night had ended. His throat closed, but instinct surged past hesitation. He reached for the attendant call button, pressing it hard. "This is urgent," he told the nearest flight attendant. "Patch me into the cockpit. Now." Moments later, Jack stood in the narrow galley headset pressed to his ear, a flight attendant watching with wide eyes. "This is Midnight Viper," Jack said, voice rough but steady. "Copy, Eagle 1. Static. Then the reply came sharp and sure. "Viper. Thought we lost you. Eyes on the storm ahead. You're in our pocket. Hold formation." Passengers crowded the aisle, craning to hear. Their fear shifted into awe. Olivia stared at Jack as though a ghost had stepped back into flesh. Jack closed his eyes for half a beat. Memories rushing, checklists, call signs, the pulse of flying wingtip to wingtip. When he opened them again, his focus was clear. "Roger, Eagle 1, he said, his voice carrying not only to the jets outside but to everyone listening. Holding formation. The cabin erupted in hushed murmurs, fear bleeding into faith. The boy with the toy jet whispered reverently, "He's really one of them." Emily tugged his sleeve, her eyes glowing. "Daddy, you answered the sky." Jack knelt, cupping her face. "I'll never stay silent again, Em. Not when the sky calls, not when you need to see me." Her tears spilled, but her smile broke through them. "Then you're still flying." The plane banked lightning, flashing one last warning before fading. The escorts held steady, guiding them through the final wall of cloud. Jack stood in the galley, not at the controls, but leading all the same. His silence shattered. His truth alive in the open air. Passengers leaned toward the aisle as if his strength could anchor them. Olivia's voice rose softer than it had ever been. "You didn't fall, Monroe. You were pushed, and somehow you're still carrying us." Jack met her eyes. For once, not with bitterness, but with quiet steadiness. Sometimes being pushed is the only way to learn you can climb. Minutes later, the clouds thinned, revealing Washington glowing beneath. The captain's voice, steadier now, returned, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are on final approach. Thanks to our escorts and to one of your fellow passengers, we're coming home safe." Applause erupted, thunderous and cathartic. People stood despite the seatbelt sign, clapping, crying, reaching to touch Jack's shoulder as though anchoring themselves to him. This time, Jack didn't wave them off. He accepted it not as a hero's welcome, but as acknowledgement. Not invisible, not silent. Seen. Emily pressed her cheek to his chest, whispering through tears and laughter, "We're landing, Daddy. Both of us." Jack kissed her forehead, his own tears finally falling. "Yes, sweetheart. Together." The wheels touched down with a screech of metal and a roar of reverse thrust. The cabin shook, but no one screamed. They laughed, they cried, they clapped, and Jack, for the first time in years, didn't feel like a ghost chained to silence. He felt like a man answering the call of the sky and of his daughter's faith. The plane rolled to a stop at the gate brakes, hissing engines winding down into a silence as heavy as the storm they had just outrun. For a beat, no one moved. 200 strangers, bound by fear and survival, held their breath as one. Then the seatbelt sign chimed off and applause thundered unrestrained raw. Passengers rose to their feet. Some clapped. Some wept. Some reached for Jack as though gratitude could spill from their hands. He stood in the aisle, Emily tucked against him, uncertain whether to shrink from the light or finally stand tall beneath it. A man in a crisp suit, the same one who had sneered at Jack's uniform hours earlier, pushed forward, his face wet with tears. He extended a trembling hand. "You saved my boy's life when you calmed this cabin. I judged you. I was wrong. I'm sorry." Jack studied the hand, then clasped it firmly. "We all carry storms inside us. Tonight just reminded me it's time I stop hiding mine." The man gripped harder, his apology silent but understood. Behind him, the boy with the toy jet stepped forward, eyes wide, voice quivering. "Sir, Midnight. Viper, would you sign this?" The call sign rippled through the cabin again like a resurrected legend. Jack crouched, taking the toy gently, and borrowed a pen from a flight attendant's tray. His voice dropped tender but steady. "Don't remember me as Midnight Viper. Remember me as a dad who tried his best." He signed the jet, then pressed it back into the boy's small hands. "And you fly higher, always higher." The boy nodded, clutching the toy like it was more than plastic, like it was permission to dream. The cockpit door opened. The captain emerged, pale with exhaustion yet lit with reverence. His voice carried authority enough to hush the cabin. "Mr. Monroe, you gave these passengers something I could not in that moment calm. Faith. Leadership. Not the kind stitched into stripes, but the kind carried in the heart." Jack shook his head. "You landed us. You carried us home." The captain's lips curved faintly. "We carried them together." Passengers began filing out, pausing to touch Jack's arm, whispering words that carved deeper than metals ever had. "You gave us hope. You showed my daughter what courage looks like. You reminded me not all heroes wear suits." When the crowd thinned, Olivia lingered. Her heels clicked softly as she approached, her expression unreadable. "For years," she said, voice low, "I thought silence meant dignity. That in boardrooms, survival meant swallowing truths. But tonight, watching you, I realized silence can be surrender, and I've surrendered too much." Jack's gaze held hers. "Silence feels safe until it robs you of yourself." Her lips parted, trembling slightly. "Then maybe it's time I find my voice." For the first time, her eyes carried no contempt, only respect. Perhaps even something warmer, though it flickered like a candle not yet ready to declare itself flame. Jack stepped onto the jet bridge and the world erupted. The terminal blazed with cameras, reporters surging forward, voices slicing through the air. "Midnight Viper. Were you really the pilot? Why were you discharged? Did you endanger these passengers? Hero or fraud?" Jack pulled Emily close, shielding her from the crush. Security rushed in, but the storm of questions pressed harder, and then Olivia moved. She strode ahead, heels striking like a gavel, arm lifted with the authority of a woman who had commanded boardrooms her whole life. "Back off," she snapped, her voice like steel. "He carried 200 souls through hell. Show respect or get out of the way." The press faltered, stunned. Olivia turned back softer now. "You don't owe them answers. Not tonight." Jack shook his head. "No, hiding's what caged me. If I stay silent now, I lock the door again." He set Emily gently at his side, squeezed her shoulder, and stepped toward the microphones. The terminal hushed, expectation hanging heavy. "My name is Jack Monroe. Once I flew under the call sign Midnight Viper. Years ago, I broke the rules in combat to save lives. For that, I was discharged. I stayed silent, believing sacrifice meant strength, but silence became my prison. Tonight, my daughter showed me the truth. Silence doesn't protect you, it erases you." He paused, voice tightening but unflinching. "I don't know if I'm a hero. I know I'm a father, and tonight I chose to be seen, not for redemption, not for medals, for her." He touched Emily's shoulder. She looked up, her eyes bright as starlight. The terminal fell still. Cameras clicked not with frenzy but with reverence. One reporter lowered her mic, whispering, That's not a fraud, that's a man. From the crowd, an officer in uniform stepped forward, chest heavy with insignia. Jack stiffened, bracing for judgment, but the officer saluted. Midnight Viper, the record never told the whole story. Some of us knew, we never forgot. Jack's throat caught. He returned the salute not as a soldier bound by duty, but as a man finally unshackled. Later, when the terminal had emptied, Jack walked hand in hand with Emily through the quiet concourse. She swung their arms, lightly humming as though storms and reckonings had never touched her spirit. "Daddy?" she asked. "Yes, sweetheart. When they clapped for you, did you feel it?" Jack smiled, pressing her small hand against his chest. "I felt it here, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone." Emily rested her head against him, whispering, "Then you're free." He kissed her hair, his heart breaking open in the best way. "Yes, Em. Finally free." The first rays of dawn filtered through the glass walls of Washington National Airport, staining the marble floor with soft gold. Outside, the storm had finally broken the sky, washed clean. For Jack Monroe, silence no longer pressed like a weight on his chest. It felt different now, lighter, almost sacred. Passengers who had survived the long night scattered toward loved ones waiting with flowers, open arms, and tears. Yet many still paused, turning back for one last glance at the man they had once dismissed as a janitor, and now regarded as something more. Some whispered blessings, others pressed a hand to their heart. They left carrying not just luggage, but a story. Jack walked slowly, Emily's small hand tucked in his. She skipped a little, her backpack bouncing with each step, her face bright despite the exhaustion. Her trust, her joy, had been his compass in the dark, and now he finally understood where it pointed. Olivia lingered nearby, her heels clicking softly as she matched his pace. The sharpness that had once defined her posture had melted into something warmer. She spoke low enough for only him and Emily to hear. "You changed the air in that cabin, Jack. I don't mean the oxygen. I mean the kind of air people breathe when they've stopped believing in hope. You gave it back." Jack studied her, his stubble catching the pale light. "I didn't do it alone. Fear doesn't leave just because you stand tall. It leaves when someone believes with you." His hand tightened gently around Emily's. Olivia's lips curved, but her eyes glistened. Then maybe that's the only kind of leadership that lasts. She hesitated, as though 1,000 unspoken words pressed against her chest. Instead, she simply touched his arm, a quiet human gesture. "Don't vanish into silence again. The world still needs your voice." Jack swallowed hard, his throat thick. "I'll try. This time. I'll try." By mid-morning, the terminal had emptied. Jack and Emily stepped out onto the curb, the city humming awake around them. A cool breeze lifted her hair as she tilted her face to the sky. "Daddy," she whispered, "the clouds look like wings." Jack followed her gaze. The broken storm clouds stretched in long arcs, sunlight piercing them like feathers etched in gold. For the first time in years, the sight didn't remind him of what he'd lost, but of what still lay ahead. "They do," he murmured, "and they're not broken anymore, just flying where they're meant to." Emily squeezed his hand. "Like us," Jack bent, pressing his forehead against hers, his voice breaking into something both prayer and promise. "Exactly like us." Later that day, in a quiet riverside park, father and daughter sat on a weathered bench. No cameras, no applause, no questions. Just two souls who had weathered a storm together. Emily leaned against him, her head tucked beneath his arm. "Daddy," she asked softly. "Yes, sweetheart." "Were you scared last night?" Jack exhaled, his chest loosening, terrified. "More than I've ever been. Not of flying, not of falling, of not being enough for you." Emily looked up, her young eyes carrying a wisdom that stilled him. "You were enough. You've always been enough. You just couldn't hear it until now." His throat burned. "You saved me, Emily. You reminded me that silence can't raise a child, can't protect a heart. Only love can." She smiled, brushing her small fingers across the calloused lines of his hand. "Then keep talking, Daddy, even when it's hard. especially when it's hard. As the sun dipped low, painting the Potomac in shades of amber and rose, Jack closed his eyes. For the first time in years, the silence around him felt like wings. Not the kind that cage, but the kind that carry. In his mind, he heard the faint echo of a radio call, a ghost of memory. Hold formation. Eagle 1. But this time, it wasn't about combat. It was about father and daughter, about holding steady together in a world that had finally stopped demanding his silence. When he opened his eyes, Emily was watching the sky, her face bathed in golden light. And Jack knew his greatest mission had never been the battles fought in the cockpit. It was this, to raise a child who believed in love more than fear, who spoke truth even when silence seemed easier. He drew her closer. "Come on, kiddo. Let's go home." Emily grinned, her voice ringing like a bell. Together, and they walked on two figures silhouetted against the sky, their shadows stretching long and steady. Not warriors, not legends. Just a father and his daughter, finally free, finally whole. The storm was behind them. The silence had found its song, and their wings, fragile, human, unbreakable, were already carrying them forward. And so their story reminds us that sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought in the skies or in crowded rooms, they're fought in the quiet corners of the heart. Love, courage, and the promise of tomorrow are the wings that carry us forward. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching this story from today? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your voice matters here. If this story touched you, make sure to subscribe to the channel and join our growing family of listeners who believe in hope, healing, and second chances. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for spending your time with this story. Until next time, may your days be filled with light, and may your heart always find its wings.